On February 7th of 2008, a deranged man would walk inside of Kirkwood City Hall, located in Missouri. This man finally had enough, and this day was the day he snapped. This is the case of Charles Thornton. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime, and I'm also a part-time real estate investor who's primarily focused on barns. The good old smell of manure in the morning. But today, we're going over the case of a man named Charles Cookie Thornton. You're going to learn about how awful of a person he truly was, hiding behind a bright, big smile, and how he longed for revenge. For our story, we're heading to Kirkwood, Missouri. With a population of around 30,000 people as of 2021, it's an inner-ring western suburb that's located in St. Louis County. In 1850, a man named James P. Kirkwood, who was the chief engineer of the Missouri Pacific Railroad, was laying out a route for a train line. 2 years later, in 1852, the city of Kirkwood was named after James, and the first suburban community was built just outside of St. Louis. Nowadays, if you're ever skydiving and lose sight of where you are because of clouds and somehow magically end up here, well, no worries. You have a couple of options. You could take a trip down to the Kirkwood Park and play some tennis or do some indoor ice skating. You could go to the Kirkwood Farmers Market and get some fresh fruit. Delicious. Or you could even go and see a play performed at Stages. Unfortunately, however, none of those delightful options are the reason as to why we're in town today. Charles Lee Thornton was born on December 23rd of 1955 to Annie Belle Thornton. Being one of 9 children, his childhood days aren't really known about, but what is known about is that he was nicknamed Cookie because it was the first word he uttered as an infant. He was known to have a bubbly personality with a big, bright smile. One of his earliest friends was a man named Chuck Runnels, who he met in kindergarten, and he comes into play a little bit later. Charles attended Kirkwood High School, and he was a standout athlete. He played basketball and was also a track star, winning the triple jump state championship in 1973 and 1974, the same year he graduated. He then went to Northeast Missouri State University, which is now known as Truman State University. Charles graduated in 1979 with a bachelor's degree in business administration, and he still holds the record for both indoor and outdoor high jump, which he set in 1979. If anyone asks about him there, that must be an awkward conversation. But Charles was named an All-American track star for both high and triple jumps, and in 1994, he was inducted to the Truman Sports Hall of Fame. After college, he would go on to register his business, Cookco Construction, in September of 1987. It was an asphalt and demolition business, and he would park his equipment on his parents' lot, which was located on Addock Street, and around the same time, he was also dating a woman. Her name was Marilyn Ann Thomas, and they got married only a short time after, on April 9th of 1988. About 3 years later, sometime in 1991, they'd have a baby girl named Sarah Elizabeth. 2 years after this, and Charles and Marilyn were having problems in their marriage. They decided to get divorced, and it was finalized on November 4th of 1993. As to whether or not Charles was a good father, or if he was ever around his daughter, well, that's not really known. He did pay child support for a bit, but we'll get into that later. Overall, signs show that he was a deadbeat dad. The next several years of his life were really just a catalyst for what was coming. Throughout the 90s, he was active in civic and charity organizations in Kirkwood. Charles served on the Kirkwood's Housing Authority Board and mentored kids at a neighborhood youth club, reading to them. In 1994, he decided to try and run for city council, but he wasn't successful with that. He finished 5th out of 6 candidates. He would also marry for the second time on August 26th of 1995 to a woman named Maureen Carol Sutherland. She was a middle school principal, and their marriage was kind of kept a secret. Charles would continue with his construction business, and it wasn't doing very well. Part of a local area named Meacham Park was going to be used for a large commercial development, and he was sure that his business was going to be the one that was contracted for the work. The mayor of the city at the time was Marge Graham, and she says she never made any specific promises to Charles. He ended up getting between $60,000 to $80,000, but this wasn't enough for him. He felt like he deserved more. The reason for this is because he lived there for so long, he felt like he was grandfathered in, that it was his right. He decided to sue the developer on claims of racism because another company got more contracts than his did. The case was tossed out. Charles was furious about this, and he tried to get the city to force the developer to rehire him. This was the first of many times that they would see him get mad. In a claim that he was betrayed, Charles would use his dump truck to block the other company's access to the job sites. When police officers showed up and asked him to move, he would just blow air horns. A few years would pass, and in 1999, Charles leased a building on Kirkwood Road. He kept it very clean, painted it, and talked all about the riches that would soon be his. He hung a sign on his office door that said, "World Headquarters of Cookco Construction." Everything at this time, from the outside, looked as if he was finally on his way up, that he was really becoming successful. I mean, that is how it appeared, and that's what he told everyone. But in reality, Charles was almost $500,000 in debt. Between 1992 to 1998, he failed to file quarterly withholding taxes a total number of 22 times. He also owed his ex-wife more than $10,000 in child support. Charles never told anyone about this. He kind of just let it happen. In 1999, he decided to file for bankruptcy protection and was put on a plan to get out of debt. He was required to pay $4,425 a month for 5 years. Golly, even now that's insane. Within about 4 months, Charles stopped making the payments. He was also unable to pay his monthly rent of $1,675 for his business. Only 6 short months after opening shop, he was evicted. Charles then had to move his business back to his parents' home. He began storing his equipment on a lot across the street, and this began a very lengthy battle with the Kirkwood government. Due to it being a code violation to park there, he started to get fined. Charles didn't want to back down, and so he began challenging the tickets that piled up. They consisted of parking violations, trash and debris on his lot, and dumping debris on vacant lots. To the city council, it made perfect sense, but to Charles, it was interfering with his right to earn a livelihood. In 2000, he got nearly 60 tickets, and in 2001, he got 39. The city decided to stop at 100 tickets for a bill of $20,000. Charles then began going to council meetings, claiming that there was a racist conspiracy against him. He would regularly hurl insults at the council members and do some pretty bizarre things. He was bringing in items such as bananas, chunks of asphalt, and even bales of hay. One time, he brought a picture of a donkey and started making noises and pretending to be one. On June 3rd of 2001, he was charged with assaulting Ken Yost, Kirkwood's public works director, who comes into play in a little bit. Everyone around town started to pick up on Charles and his antics, but it didn't seem incredibly malicious. The city was pretty tired of him, however, and so they decided to start ticketing him less. It became pointless, and so they then offered to erase the fines from all of the tickets, so long as Charles agrees to be less confrontational. That's not what he wanted, though. He wanted money. He attempted to sue Kirkwood for malicious prosecution after being convicted of assault and on ordinance violations. Charles argued that the city should pay him $12 million. A judge quickly dismissed the case, and so he tried to appeal it to the state Supreme Court, and they refused to take it. The next year, on January 5th of 2004, Charles filed a federal lawsuit against the Missouri Supreme Court, but this was also dismissed. The more time that would pass, the more resentful he would grow. By 2005, Charles was picketing outside of Kirkwood City Attorney John Hessel's law firm. He was claiming that he's been set up and that he's going to be taken to jail. John asked him what this was all about, and Charles said, "It's a cover-up. I got proof in my car." Then John asked to go and look at it, and the two of them walked about 10 steps when Charles stopped. He then said, "I'm not giving you anything." This is when John realized that one of Charles's protest signs was tied to a parking meter. John told him that he can't use public property to picket, and in a rage of anger, Charles pushed John to the curb and gave him a menacing look. He then stood there and said, "Touch it again." Charles would continue going to council city meetings and acting a fool. By 2006, he started to lay on the floor and let his body go limp so he'd have to be removed. He was acting like an absolute menace, but the worst was yet to come. Going back a few years, and in 2003, Charles refinanced his parents' already paid off home for $72,000. The next year, in 2004, he refinanced his parents' retirement home in St. Petersburg for $230,000. A few years later, and in January of 2007, with his wife Maureen and brother Gerald, they refinanced their parents' home again, this time getting a loan for $352,000. It's very clear that Charles was incredibly irresponsible with money. Also, a bit bizarre, but in 2004, Charles's wife Maureen ended up moving to Florida by herself. Occasionally, Charles would go there to visit her, but that was about it. He would continue his bizarre sequence of events over and over again, and he kept trying to sue the city. On May 18th of 2006, he was arrested for the first time at a city council meeting and shortly after, arrested for the same thing. On June 1st of this same year, the city council considered banning him from attending or speaking at the meetings. They decided to go with neither of these options. The Kirkwood mayor at the time was named Mike Swoboda, and he stated that we will act with integrity and continue to deal with him at these council proceedings. However, we will not allow Mr. Thornton or any other person to disrupt these proceedings. About a year later, on June 24th of 2007, Charles was charged with a misdemeanor assault after he got into a fight. He was picketing outside of a restaurant when the owner came out to stop him. Charles and the owner got into a fight, and Charles began stomping him on the ground, only stopping when being subdued by bystanders. The criminal case for this was pending. Charles was continuously trying to sue the city, and he made multiple claims to friends and family that this was going to make him a millionaire. This same year, on January 1st, the IRS filed a tax lien of $195,000 against him, and then another one in March for $17,000. At this point, he was really in need of money, and he thought that what he was doing was the only way to get it. His final attempt of suing, after years of trying previously, was dismissed on February 1st of 2008. This was Charles's final straw. On February 7th of 2008, the day started out normal as any other would. Charles was at his house that he shared with his mother, messing with a poster board that he had in his room. On one side of the poster board, it read, "The unrest in Meacham Park will continue until the racist plantation mentality of the Kirkwood officials are addressed." On the other side, it read, "Justice of Constitution rights is all I seek." Charles then left a note on his bed that read, "The truth will come out in the end." Afterwards, he told his family, "To God be the glory, I love you, I'll see you later," and left his house. Next, Charles decided to visit his childhood friend from kindergarten, Chuck Runnels. He told Chuck that he needed him to do him a favor. Charles wanted Chuck to hold on to photos and money from a breakfast club that helped kids in their neighborhood they helped to start. Charles never told him why, and Chuck never thought to ask. Chuck just assumed that Charles was going to Florida for a few weeks or something. Together, they had hamburgers for dinner and sat on the sofa watching NFL highlights. They also began flipping through photos of their breakfast club, and Charles began reminiscing on his days in high school. After about an hour, he stood up and said that he had to go. Later that night, Charles appeared on Chuck's TV screen, but for all the wrong reasons. After he left Chuck's house, Charles decided that it was time to act. Loaded with a .44 Magnum revolver, he parked his van on a side street near Kirkwood City Hall. Here he saw Kirkwood Police Sergeant William Biggs. He was on duty, walking across the street to pick up some dinner nearby. In a parking lot across the street from City Hall, Charles confronted William and then shot him, killing him instantly. Before William was taken out, he was able to hit a distress signal on his radio, which alerted other officers that he needed help. Charles then took William's gun and went inside of the City Hall. In the City Council chambers, there was about 30 people in attendance. The mayor just began speaking after the Pledge of Allegiance was recited when Charles entered the room quietly from the back. He kept both of his weapons concealed until he got close to his intended targets. First, he shot Kirkwood police officer Tom Ballin in the head and then continued on his rampage. He kept repeating the phrase, "shoot the mayor." Charles ended up fatally shooting council members Connie Carr, Michael Lynch, and Public Works Director Ken Yost, who Charles previously had an altercation with. He also shot the mayor, Mike Swoboda, twice in the head and left him for dead. He then saw reporter Todd Smith and shot him too. After killing most of the people he wanted to, he ignored the 4 other council members and started chasing down the city attorney, John Hessel. John slowed Charles down by throwing chairs at him until he was finally able to escape. Eventually, 2 Kirkwood police officers rushed to the council chambers and began a firefight with Charles, hitting him. Charles Lee Cookie Thornton was pronounced dead at the scene. This was an absolute shock to the entire city of Kirkwood. How could a man with the nickname Cookie, who was harassing the city council for years in an annoying but seemingly harmless way, be capable of such a thing? Charles's mother, Annie Bell's response was, well, the ones he shot, I guess, were the ones he felt had done him harm and that she can't believe that it happened. His brother Gerald Gordon, who actually served 5 years in Missouri prison for fatally stabbing a man in 1996, had this to say. First, how do you only get 5 years for that? What?
It led him to believe that he only had the actions of declaring war against the persons that were causing this strife in his life.
I hope that everyone understands that we all have lost.
Do you feel like what he did was wrong?
I can't judge that. This type of action will at least be uncommon. We will have advanced as humans, and I hope that today it starts.
This is how Charles's other brother Arthur responded.
He's not a mean man, he's a loving man. And this was a violent act. It's not Cookie. I am truly sorry. You know, it's a very sad event.
Arthur's response is much better. It appears as if Gerald was egging Charles on in a way. If anything, there were multiple people in his life who condoned his activities. An activist in the area named Ben Gordon even went as far as to call him a hero. But that's obviously not what he was. If anything, he was the complete opposite. Charles Lee Thornton was an excuse for a man who got into a heaping load of legal trouble and couldn't find his way out. After getting into a ridiculous amount of debt because of himself, he continued to dig deeper into the hole he created. Rather than facing his problems, he tried to blame the city council for things that were out of their control. And those city council members even went as far as to completely forget about Charles's debt owed to the city. But no, that just wasn't good enough. While yes, sometimes there are cases where racism is a problem, in his case, it wasn't. Charles was very wrong for what he did and was hiding behind a facade of this bubbly personality and bright smile. In reality, he was a monster. Connie Carr was a very energetic person who was committed to the city of Kirkwood. She was always savvy and full of ideas. She intended to run for mayor one day and was in her 2nd term as a Kirkwood council member. She left behind a husband named Kevin and a daughter named Lauren. Michael H.T. Lynch had accomplished many things in his life, but he was most remembered for his warm personality and immense likability. He worked for the city for many years, and in addition to this, also co-owned a business. He left behind his wife Sally and his 2 children, Michelle and Patrick. Kenneth Dale Yost served as a city engineer and public works director for the city of Kirkwood since 1973. He loved the city and was a well-liked, respectable man. He left behind a wife named Kathy and a son named David. Sergeant William Biggs Jr. was a police officer every day. Some days he wore the uniform and other days he didn't, but he was always a police officer. He was a great man with morals and a will to obey the law. He left behind a wife named Cindy and 2 sons named Bo and Cody. Officer Thomas Frederick Ballman was a very good man. He was a Marine when he was younger and eventually got a wife. He had a great sense of humor and also became a police officer for the city of Kirkwood. He left behind his wife Cynthia and at the time a 5-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter. The mayor, Mike Swoboda, actually ended up surviving and even went home after rehabilitation. His recovery, as friends and family labeled, was amazing and became symbolic to many of those who watched him. He loved gardening, coaching his son's soccer and basketball teams, and really loved history. He was overall a great man and great father. But sadly, about 7 months later, on September 6th of 2008, Mike passed away due to complications related to the injuries he suffered in the shooting. He left behind a wife of 42 years named Sue, a son named after him, Michael, and a daughter named Katie. Todd Smith, the reporter, survived his injuries of being shot in the hand. This ironically wasn't the first time he was shot. The first time was 10 years prior when he went to 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. The shop was in a pretty bad neighborhood, and he ended up being confronted by a gunman on his way home. Todd tried to run away, but they shot him in the leg. This is what he had to say after everything.
The thing that I feel most bad is the people that didn't make it, and there was no reason for that. I mean, just seeing him shoot someone without regard, it's just that shouldn't happen in this world.
This man is incredibly lucky, but at the same time, not. I just want to say rest in peace to all of the people who lost their lives on this awful day for no reason. They did absolutely nothing wrong, and I genuinely hope that they're all resting peacefully and that their families are one day able to find some closure. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. I also have a second account with my brother named Horrifying, where we tell stories about everything paranormal. This includes true crime, mysteries, and things that are just downright spooky. I'd greatly appreciate if you subscribe to that too. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.